And so the very first policy I ever sold was to my father. And 20 years later, my father dropped dead. And he was my first estate. Can you believe it? After 20 years in the business. And I realized then that I had been in a very practical business of theory. But the reality of a death is so different to just planning for it. And it ended up with me writing a book called Lessons from My Late Father, which really changed the way that I've been doing planning and the way I've viewed my own life for the last decade. And it's changed the way that I help my clients think. It's very small things like never die at the end of the month. So my father died on the 30th of April. And it was the next day was a Friday, and the Lions were playing Crusaders at Ellis Park. And so my dad and I, we used to love our rugby together, and he didn't answer my call. And finally, he phones back that Thursday morning. I said, geez, Dad, where have you been? And the guy says, who's speaking? I said, okay, you're not my dad. What's happened to my dad? He says, I'm the paramedic and he's dead. So the first thing you learn is that death is quick and it's final and it's over. And, as much as I'm a man of God, I can pray over a lot of things, but I was stuck in the traffic in Linden picking up my tickets. So I thought, well, I need not rush across there. But when I did get across there at about 8:15, the first issue I had to deal with was the man who raised me. His name is Philip. And Philip was devastated. He was crying over my father's body. He had been with my father for 40 years. He had raised me. And finally, when I finished with the snort and trana on my clothing from hugging him and just pacifying him, he wiped his eyes, looked me in the eye and said, who's paying me today? And I said, well, it won't be John. So I said, how much do you get paid? And he told me a number, and I thought, wow, my dad was a really generous man. And at 9 o'clock, I went through the same rigmarole again with his domestic lady who used to come and clean his house 3 times a week. And it was just hysterical. That day, my son used to play rugby, and I played quite competitive golf on Thursdays. And so it used to be Grandpa and his grandson's rugby day. And I had to cancel golf, which I'd never done. And I had to go to pick my son up and watch him play rugby. And when I got there, my son said, where's Grandpa? And that's for the first time when I kind of had a little bit of a meltdown. And the very first question he asked me after that was, did Grandpa have his cell phone hanging around his neck when he died? I said, yeah, I took it off him this morning when his body was lying in the passage between the kitchen and the lounge. I said, that's quite an interesting question, Tristana. Why? He says, Dad, do you know what his PIN number for his cell phone is? I said, whoa, now you've got me. What? Why would I want to know that? He says, well, if the phone goes dead, how are you going to start it again and phone all his buddies and tell them about the funeral? And I realized I have been a crap financial planner for 20 years because I hadn't been collecting the right information. So it led to the book and led to a whole lot of different matrices that we talk about differently today when we do financial planning with our clients.
Wow. Isn't it amazing that we can learn so much at maybe the worst time in our lives? When
Absolutely.
That has raised, we've loved and been so much part of our life. And then the very thing that we're doing stops being theoretical. And as you say, you that ultra focus in that moment, and that those lessons are now what you pass on to your customers.